It's time to get the breakdown started. 1, 2, 3. First up, 10 observations.
Mr. Good guy and just boom, put him right on the ground.
It's First and 10.
Oh boy, where to start? Let's start with the highest level of thought specific to this game. I'm just going to say this, and then we're going to get on to the larger, bigger point.
Number 1.
The most important thing for the Dolphins-Commanders game is that was a good football team against a bad football team, and they played football, and what happened was what happens when a good football team plays a bad football team, and that is really the most important thing you need to know as to why they lost by $1 billion. That's it. Like, it was not only a good football team in the Dolphins, but a good football team that does the things well that the Commanders have as weaknesses as a bad football team. Again, that's not earth-shattering analysis, but they lose 45-15, and that's why. So let's just acknowledge that. We'll get to some specifics, but let's then get to the actual biggest takeaway for me from this game, and this is going to be a headline that stuns people.
Number 2.
In this football game, Mike McDaniel exposed Eric Bieniemy more than he did Ron Rivera. Wait a second. You mean Mike McDaniel, the offensive coach, exposed the other offensive coach more than the defensive coach that he dropped 45 points on? I guess 37, 38, because one of it was a pick six. Yeah, I did say that, and I mean every word of it. Let me explain. What you saw yesterday at FedEx Field was the team in white running a big boy modern 2023 offense. And Anthony, hilariously, do you remember the promo that we had running for a while about me saying, I'm excited because I think the Commanders are going to run a big boy 2023 offense?
Yes, I do.
They didn't. They don't do that. They don't run a big boy 2023 NFL offense. In fact, they run the West Coast version of what Scott Turner ran. I can't believe on December 4th, I'm sitting here saying that. But they run a West Coast versus an Eric Coryell version of what Scott Turner ran. It's simple pictures for the quarterback. It's not using motions and formations to create matchups for your star players. It's not playing to your strength. It's just relying on the scheme to win. And that doesn't work because the last 40 years of the NFL, defenses have been trying to stop those offenses. The Eric Coryell system from Coryell himself and the West Coast Bill Walsh system. Defenses now in 2023 with their zone match concepts and all the different tools they have know what to do with basic schemes. So how do you then use that against them and create great matchups in space, big plays, good angles in the run game, etc. for your players, even if they're very good players, not just rely on the fact that they might win one-on-one. And Mike McDaniels takes that to the biggest extreme in the NFL. They game plan everything. Tyreek Hill is everywhere. Is Tyreek Hill the best receiver in football? Probably. Is he definitely playing the best because he actually plays for a coach who says, hey, man, I know you're really good. And typically we try to, traditionally NFL offensive coordinators just gimmick stuff up for players who aren't very good. They just leave players who are good alone and trust that they'll win. But what if we took the concepts that are used to make sure that not as good players got open and applied them to you? And the answer is this offense. And if you watch the two teams play yesterday and you think Washington's offense looks anything like Miami's, I revoke your football watching intelligence card. I don't think I'm going to have to do that to anyone because the results are self-evident. And by the way, the numbers at this point aren't that different from what we saw last year. And again, Scott Turner last year was dealing with Carson Wentz for 6+ games. That's the results. Like, we can talk about the process, and I'll keep going on that in a second, but the results are damning at this point. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, for anyone that thought EB might be a candidate here as head coach, I think at this point, with the way the defense is going and with a bunch of all the other stuff, like, If they wanted him to be the guy, like, they would have made him the guy. I think I'm pretty confident in that. And I am definitely ready to definitively say here on December 4th that I am not interested in another year of this. I would like some more creativity. I would like some more innovation, and I would like a different philosophy. And the biggest difference between old school and new school philosophy in the NFL right now offensively is not West Coast versus Air Coryell, horizontal versus vertical, run versus pass. It is personnel versus scheme. And what the best coaches are doing is using scheme to elevate great personnel versus trusting that good personnel will win and produce with a good scheme. That is the difference. And what's crazy to me is if you watch Kansas City's offense while Bieniemy was there, by the way, an offense that's struggling more than it has recently without him. So it's not like EB didn't contribute anything there. It's not like he's a big giant dum-dum. It's just that, like, it's for whatever reason, this year, he hasn't done some of the stuff that worked for him in the past. You watch how they game plan stuff for Kadarius Toney. You watch how they game plan stuff for Tyreek back in the day. You watch how they game plan stuff, obviously, for Travis Kelce over the course of years. But also, part of the reason that offense works so damn well is because it is designed for some more interior type of players, and Kelce, as a tight end, is the ultimate of that. It also works well when you have a quarterback who's super creative, and you've seen Sam shine at times this year with that. And Mahomes and Kelce have this incredible chemistry that ultimately makes that thing Super Bowl worthy year in and year out, although currently not maximized, as we see with them losing again last night. But the Miami offense is dynamic. It's balanced, not 50-50 balance. It's not what balanced means. Balance doesn't mean two people on or one person on either side of the seesaw. It means the right weights on each side of the seesaw. And that's what Miami's is. They run it enough that they get the benefit of their play-action game. Their play-action game is married to their run game. Their protections make sense for the route combination. It is dynamic, it is cohesive, and it is specific. Miami, more than any other team in football, says, what do you do defensively? When do you do it? Okay, if they then are going to run this front most of the time on first down, we're going to make sure we practice running our base runs this week against that front. We're going to game plan it up. And that's the difference between your training camp offense that is more or less generic. Hey, in theory, you're going to kind of block this guy. Well, what happens when this guy's over there? Or this guy now is on the wrong side of you? Do you figure out how to create a better angle? Do you figure out how to change the numbers? Like, do you do the little things that when teams throw wrinkles at you to make your life difficult, you have an adjustment ready? The Commanders don't. The Dolphins do. The Dolphins have maybe the best offensive in the NFL, and the Commanders are bottom 10 again. Yesterday, Mike McDaniel exposed Eric Bieniemy more than he did Ron Rivera.
Number 3.
Terry McLaurin didn't forget how to play football. And it's interesting hearing some of the commentary of, oh, he's overrated, he was never that good, blah, blah, blah. Terry McLaurin is a really freaking good football player, and I've already been exchanging some film clips with Logan. Like, there's opportunities in this game where he just doesn't get the football. He does what he's supposed to. Or other people get in his way, like John Dotson. There's one play I was looking at that I think Terry could have gotten a look if he could have been faster into his route, but Jahan Dotson is slow off his release out of a bunch, and he's kind of in Terry's way. And so what's Terry supposed to do? Run him over? Like, no, that's going to make it slower for the both of them. So he kind of skips, hops, and releases behind Jahan, but by then the offensive line, which we'll get to, is giving up a pressure, and Sam can't get the ball to Terry. Like, there are opportunities in this game. There's no feasible way that he should have 3 targets and no catches. He's too good for that. And, of course, some of that is on him. But it goes back to what I talked about with Bieniemy, where do you believe in getting your best players the football and having that win you football games? Because if you do, you find ways. Screens. He is an excellent slant runner. That can't be that hard to get him isolated, whether it's as an outside receiver or, God forbid, you move him into the slot. I mean, look at what Mike McDaniel did yesterday on that first Tyreek Hill touchdown. He created a man-to-man matchup of Tyreek Hill on Quan Martin man-to-man with no safety help. Don't tell me it can't be done. It's like, hey, it's third down. There's a good chance they're going to play man here. Let's find out. Okay, cool. Let's move A-Chain outside. Jamin Davis followed him. That's man-to-man. By the way, A-Chain smoked Davis on that. Jamin got lucky. The ball went the other way. Not lucky as a team because the other way was to Tyreek Hill with no safety help because the safety was helping to the running back on linebacker side. But that happens, one, because you get Tyreek matched up against your nickel corner. It happened to be Quan on that particular one, a rookie nickel corner. And they do it out of the slot, so there's more room to work, right? A slot fade is way easier. One, you have a two-way go, so you can either beat your guy inside and then box him to the outside, or you can get a clean release outside and there's more space to throw it. So it's a more ideal throw, and you're just operating in acres of space. Why can't they do that stuff with McLaurin? There's no good reason. And so it drives me bananas, some of the stuff about Terry. And obviously he's got this incredible quote after the game where he's like, yeah, I got some good cardio in out there. But some of this is on Sam and decision-making. Some of this is on Eric and design flaw. Some of this is on other people getting in the way, not running the right routes. And some of it is on Terry not performing up to the level that he would certainly hope. But at the same time, like, if as a human being, I have empathy for Terry because you're having the worst season of your career with this guy that was supposed to turn you into an all-pro. And, like, that's got to be hard to mentally keep plowing forward. And you're not going to have a rhythm. You're not going to feel in the game in the same way. It's not like he's not playing hard. But, God, what a tough day at work for Terry McLaurin yesterday.
Number 4.
Continuing on this, like, things Eric perhaps could be more creative with train and in ways that this offense probably could have been better and helped itself and helped the defense, which is not good. All that stuff. What if they had like a run game with Sam Howell? You know, you watched Sam yesterday, and this kid is so special off schedule. He's so special as a runner, like not in the way Lamar Jackson is special as a runner, but he just picks up big plays and like he's tough and he's elusive and he sets up blocks. He sees the field extremely well as a runner when he gets out into space. So why not use that? Like you're struggling to find things that work, that create rhythm, that help him feel in the game. So you found quick game for a while. And by the way, your run game is actually been pretty efficient, but most of that is just because you're subverting expectations and no one ever anticipates you running. And maybe if you had a little bit, something you liked a little bit more, you could get some more consistency and you like these gun runs. So if you zone read that and you make it so you take either a player out of the run fit because he's got to account for Sam, or he goes and chases a running back who doesn't have the ball and Sam's got a wide open lane, these seem like good things. So, you know, I'm not an offensive coordinator. I am not an NFL coach, but I've been around this game long enough and I know enough and I've studied enough and talked to enough smart people to know like some of the options available on a big picture basis. And that's one that just doesn't make sense to me that they haven't used this year. And you're reminded of it yesterday as Sam finds the end zone again and has another pretty significant day on the ground.
Number 5.
The pick six. Yikes, man. I don't know whether that's bad play design and Wiley's not supposed to get a punch, or Wiley just kind of times it out and he's like, I'm trying to get a punch. This guy's running away from me. Okay, I leave now. And he just figures he's out of the play. And then he's not, because he's very much in the play. In fact, he's in the throwing lane. But that's just brutal. And it's the kind of detail level mistake that either from a design flaw standpoint or an execution standpoint shouldn't be happening in the NFL. It's also a ridiculous play by Van Ginkel to feel that out. It's good scouting, but that's another thing. Like you talk about the sequencing of play calls, and there's a couple times in this game, some of it's third down, some of it's that, where it's like you're predictable offensively. And if a team knows what's coming, it's way easier to stop. And whether it's a certain run, whether it's a favorite concept. I mean, we killed Scott Turner last year for running mesh on every third down. This team has some tendencies like that. And out of that formation and kind of that point in the game, they were due for a wide receiver screen, and Van Ginkel was all over it. Ugh, woof. Not great. Bob.
Number 6.
I don't know whether that one was on Wiley, but generally speaking, the offensive line did not have a good day. A couple of examples. And by the way, this is why it's so hard to talk about offensive line play as a whole, is like on all these plays I'm going to mention, it's like one guy. Now, there are times where there's bad communication or multiple guys lose, but you can have, guys have really good, like Sam Cosmi had a good game yesterday. He was fine. Nothing really to complain about with Sam Cosmi's day. And for a lot of plays, most of the other guys were largely fine. They ran the ball well yesterday, so that should probably be mentioned as a positive for the O-line. But, second drive of the game, first play. 4 guys block it great, and Chris Paul just absolutely gets smoked. Bad day for Chris Paul at the office yesterday. And it should have been an easy first down completion. And if I remember correctly, it probably would have been to Terry. And instead, Sam scrambles, and he makes a nice little play out of it. But your offense's ability to get going, get in a rhythm, and be on schedule is not there because your offensive line can't hold up in key situations. The third down on that same drive is the Van Ginkel spin move, which is just a really great play by him, but also kind of a weird set by Wiley. It's a weird rush or protection plan where Bates swings the rusher way wide on a chip, and then Wiley finds himself in like an awkward amount of space. He's got to do better in that. You give him the help of the chip. At that point, you got to protect the pocket, even if the pocket is going to be keeping the back door closed. Like, you got to figure that out. And then there's a play later in the game, one of Terry's 3 targets, the one that they miss him in the end zone. Good play by Xavier Howard. Sam's got to throw that up early, and maybe he's able to lead Terry to open space if he's got more time. But it's a blitz, and I don't know whether it wound up being a true blitz or simulated pressure, but the defensive end drops out. The linebacker comes, and from a responsibility standpoint, Charles Leno is correct in looking at the defensive end, being like, that's my guy to block. But you let a guy, like, he's dropping, and you have a guy run right past you. Like, is that on the back? Is that on, did Chris Paul need to slide? But, like, at some point, you need your offensive linemen to play a little bit, not outside of structure and scheme, because that gets you in trouble, but you need them to make plays. And it's like, hey, I saw that guy's dropping out. This guy seems to be going to murder my quarterback. I'm going to take a step to my right and decleat him. That would be good. Instead, Sam takes pressure, takes a big hit. Terry's not able to make the play down the field. Good play by Howard. But at the end of the day, what happens if Sam can step into that throw? Can he dot Terry? Can he lead him maybe farther to the middle of the field in space? Is that a touchdown at a key point in the game when it's still close-ish? I don't know. We can't know because it didn't happen. Offensive line, not good.
Number 7.
Speaking of not good, this is the unscariest defense that I can remember watching in all my years here. They always had Ryan Kerrigan or Preston Smith or Chase or Montez. John has been here most of the time that I've been here. Duran. Like, they've had players who can get after the quarterback. They've always had someone floating around the back end who felt a little dangerous from a turnover perspective. They don't have any of that right now. And there's no pass rush. There's no playmaking. I mean, there's a play in the game. I think it's in the second quarter. It's like 2 plays before the second Hill touchdown. Tua's back there, and he sees Jalen Waddle running deep on Benjamin St. Juste and Percy Butler, and he basically goes, bleep it, I'm throwing it. And he heaves it long, and he's trying to, hope that Waddle can run past those 2 guys, and they do a good job of staying there and breaking up the play. But there's no fear it's going to be picked off. It's like, double coverage, but those two guys are not going to make a play. So let's throw it, and maybe something good happens. Maybe we get a PI. Maybe Jalen comes down with it. Maybe they trip over each other. Who knows? But there's no fear, and that's a rough place to be. That ship is so sailed by now. I don't really have a lot to say on the defense, and they're bad. I think they can play better over the final 4 games with the simplification. There was some stuff, believe it or not, that was better yesterday, but they played the worst team they could play in the whole league yesterday, and that, yes, the score line is a result of that more so than it is anything else.
Number 8.
If you want something positive, I think KJ Henry's a good football player. Their 5th-round pick who was inactive most of the first part of the year because he wasn't as impactful of a special teams guy as Andre Jones Jr. He's obviously been getting way more opportunities since the trades and the injury to F.A. Obata and the injury to James Smith-Williams. And he is showing that I think he can be a part of your rotation, and he might be good enough to be a starter next year. He's not going to be a stud by any stretch of the imagination, but just a very solid football player. And, I remember talking to someone after they drafted him who was down at Clemson, and he's like, from a character standpoint, this guy's off the charts. The kind of like just core piece that you can build around, and kind of like James and Casey have been these last 4 years, where it's, hey, these are really reliable guys that if we need them to start in a pinch, they're not going to leave us out to dry. They're not going to make a ton of plays, but they'll do the job. And you need, I think one of the lessons we learned from the Sweat Young experiment is you need a guy like that on your D-line. You need guys that will just rush the rush plan, not go out of structure, not freelance. And there's real value in structure so that other guys can freelance off of them. And so they need to get an impact edge guy this offseason, whether it's draft or free agency. No question about it. But I think KJ Henry might actually be the guy that they can play on the other side. If not, he's definitely, like, his floor is he's a part of the rotation next year. So that's nice.
Number 9.
Speaking of things you can keep for next year, if you want to keep something for next year for continuity, and I realize no fan wants to do that, but organizationally speaking, if you're Josh Harris, there is, and by the way, there is something to that, to have someone on the coaching staff, someone in the building who the players know, we're familiar with, and someone who, by the way, is also familiar with them. So that when a new coach comes in, yes, you want them to be able to form their own opinions, but if they want to know, like, hey, what's so-and-so like? How do I get through to him? To not have to learn that all fresh, to have someone with some institutional knowledge of the people around. Nate Katzer would be actually a good guy to potentially keep. The Commanders' special teams has been fine this year, and they've done that despite a number of key injuries to key special teamers at varying times. Like Christian Holmes missed a long time. Next guy stepped up, was fine. Like Quan Martin struggled immensely on defense. He's been a good special teams player. And I think the biggest one is obviously Jeremy Reeves, who was an all-pro last year. And Terrell Burgess has stepped in and been fantastic on teams for them. Being that personal punt protector, being a guy who gets downfield and makes plays. Like, he hasn't been as good as Reeves, but he's been solid. And from a production standpoint, you haven't given up big punt returns. You haven't given up big plays. And so if you want to keep Katzer around next year, I don't think that's a bad idea. And by the way, Reeves replaced Shazer Everett, and who was awesome before Reeves was. So there's clearly a through line of good coaching and good organization on that. And I think that there is some value in keeping someone who, by the way, knows more players than anyone else on the roster, because that is the nature of special teams. You don't have to. It's up to the next coach. I'm not going to throw a fit over the special teams coach by any stretch. But if he winds up staying around, just remember this little nugget from this here 1st and 10.
Number 10.
Last but not least, and this is something we're going to get into as the week goes, the question of identity with this team, besides punching bag right now, which is not an identity any team likes to be, you just kind of watch sometimes and you go, what are they trying to do? Like, what were they built for? Because they ran the ball pretty well yesterday, and they drafted Brian Robinson, and they did all this stuff from a roster standpoint. Then they hired Eric Bieniemy and passed the ball more than anyone else. And by the way, they also drafted a bunch of receivers and spent money on Curtis Samuel. And it's just a non-cohesive roster. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to follow this offseason is what parts of this roster stay, what parts go. In part because if you play a certain way, certain guys are a great fit, scheme fit potentially. You go a different way, a whole different guy or group of guys might also be very beneficial, but the Venn diagram of both is a bunch of losses, and that's where the current team sits. That is our 1st and 10. 10 observations from the game, and this one, the Commanders' 9th loss of the season. When we get back, Logan Paulson and I's instant reaction of the game from FedEx Field. Take command on a Monday. Michael Phillips joins us 5 o'clock. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.